Hello everyone, Trophy Wine Hunter. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today I'm doing a review of the 2010 Chateau Giscours from the Margaux region. Chateau Giscours is a third growth wine in the 1855 classification system. If you want to know more about the classification system, you can check out my videos where I go through that in detail. So Giscours as an estate has been around since the 14th century. It was a fortified property and it wasn't making wine at that time. It didn't make wine until 1552 when a person called Pierre de Lhomme bought the winery, and he bought the noble house of Guyscoutz, and that's how you get the name Giscours. And so Giscours has had quite a few owners over the years, and has had some spotty times, has some good times, has some bad times. In 1855, it was classified as a third growth, but it has had its difficult times. Like most wineries, it was taken back during the French Revolution, and again has had multiple owners, so sometimes good, sometimes bad. Always a very nice vineyard, but again, what you'll see with the history of a lot of estates, ownership is really important. That continuity of ownership. If you notice, most of the top wineries, the first growths, they barely ever change hands. And when you get down to the third, fourth, fifth growths, there's quite a bit of change in ownership. And that doesn't help the process. It's really difficult when you continue to change ownership, because once you change ownership, you also change direction, you change the winemaker, you change the management. So it takes a while for the winery to get going again, and then they sell it again. So let's move into the modern age. The modern age, let's say 1950s, it was owned by the Tari family. I think they were Algerian in ethnicity, and they owned it till 1995. And what's notable about their ownership is that Pierre Tari was one of the judges in the Judgment of Paris, the famous kind of wine tasting that pitted Californian wines against French wines. In 1995, it was purchased by Eric Albada Jelgersma. And so his family has owned it since 1995, and that's a good thing for the winery to have that continuity. He did pass away in 2018 and is now managed by his children, Dennis, Derk, and Valerie. As I close up on the label a little bit later on, you'll see at the top of the crown a mermaid. And that mermaid is, in French, is called Serene, and that was part of their emblem back almost in the 1600s, and it's now found on every bottle of Chateau Giscours, and in fact that's the name of their second wine. The second wine is called Le Serene de Giscours, and I guess this mermaid is very associated with their winery. So 1995 was significant because when Mr. Jelgersma took over control, he also brought in Alexander van Beek as his managing director. And so the managing director is really the CEO of the winery, who's very important in the overall direction of the company. And from that period on, it's really been a great time for Giscours, other than in 1998, just after Eric purchased the winery. They were accused of blending their vineyards in Haut Medoc with their second wine, Le Serene de Giscours, and even adding milk and fruit acids to their wine. They did admit to that, and unfortunately they said, hey, that's how everyone else does things. That's not an excuse. And so that has set back the winery for many years in terms of their credibility. And again, it takes a long time when you do this type of stuff to get back credibility. But I guess Eric Jelgersma just was owning the property, and he was just getting to know things. So it really wasn't his fault. Since he has owned the winery, I think the winery has got a lot better. In particular, after 2000, the wines have been much, much better. So this is what we talk about in terms of historical context. So when we talk about certain wines like Le Carme, Aubryon, or even Becherville, du Hart Melon, we have to look at not just recent, these last 20 years. We have to look at 50 years, 100 years, 150 years. And that's the context. When we talk about greatness in terms of wineries, we can't look at a short period like 20 years. For you and me, 20 years is a long time. In terms of wineries, that's a very short time for excellence. And so Giscours has had spotty times. And even though they've had great vintages since 2000, the jury is still out and they're still struggling to keep this place among the third growths. The winery is actually quite large. It's about 165 acres. 102 acres are within the Margaux region. And that's planted 65% Cabernet Sauvignon, 30% Merlot, 3% Petit Verdot, and 2% Cabernet Franc. In the past, it was much more Merlot based, and now they have planted more Cabernet Franc since the Alexander van Beek has been part of the management team. And most people think that has been a good thing, that is probably better suited to the soil, better suited to the climatic conditions, and has produced a more robust wine. They have another 62 hectares in Haut Medoc, and that's the wines that are subject to this controversy in 1998 when they used those wines to blend into their second wine. 20% of their vineyard is biodynamically farmed. So they're a little bit behind other wineries in terms of being organic and kind of the modernization, although they have upgraded obviously the vineyard and the winery over time. They produce 25,000 cases per year of the Grand Cru wine. So that's quite a bit for a Bordeaux winery. Like Lafite, I think it produces half of that. And the Haut Medoc wines are not used in either Chateau Giscours or their second wine. It's another label, and so that was the problem that people had. You're kind of blending an inferior label into your second wine and calling it Margaux when it's actually Haut Medoc. Let's talk a little bit about the 2010 vintage. So 2010 was a very, very strong vintage for the entire Bordeaux region, and particularly for Margaux, because Margaux sometimes can be lighter, and it's a very strong vintage for all wines, and that extra heat has really helped the wine. It also helps in terms of the longevity of the wine. So this is really a nice time to actually start to taste this wine. It is by no means over the hill. It's probably just starting to reach its potential at this point. Let's look at the cork. So this is caused by me taking in and pulling out the cork multiple times because I store it differently. So the cork is actually in very good shape for a 2010 Giscours. So not many cuts, very nice shape. So this is the bottle, very simple label. If you see on the top of this, there's a mermaid, and I described that in the video, 2010, and it's Grand Cru Classé 1855, the 1855 classification system. And then in the back, there's many words, which is kind of too hard to see. I don't think I can close up on it, but it is all in French, trust me. And so it says a lot of the information I said in the video. And you'll see this little thing here, this gold thing. I see this quite a bit. I think it's a kind of a verification. I see this a lot when it comes from the chateau directly. So that's normally a fairly good sign. Let's look at the wine itself. So color is still nice and vibrant for 2010. I still think it shows very nice color, very dark ruby red. The 2010 vintage was 71% Cabernet Sauvignon, 29% Merlot, and it was aged in oak barrels for 17 months, 50%, which was new oak. So I have actually opened this wine for now about 5 hours. I actually have tasted it over lunch, over dinner, with a number of friends. We've actually had 2 different bottles of this wine. I did not decant it, and so, but I've naturally let it air over time. And I can tell you, fresh out of the bottle, it was a little tight, but it has opened up quite a bit over time. So let's see how it's doing now, probably almost 5 or 6 hours after the initial opening of this bottle. So on the smell, this reminds me of really what Margaux is about. Always people think Margaux is feminine or weak or dilute. Not at all. So Margaux itself still has a lot of Cabernet Sauvignon. It does have some Merlot to kind of soften it. What I find with Margaux wines is they're always aromatic, but not aromatic in terms of floral. It's just their aromas are a little bit more easy to see than other parts of the left bank of Bordeaux. I also find they have a roundness, which is really nice, and I think that's partly the Merlot. I really like Margaux wines because they are strong, but not too strong for my palate. On the nose, you smell oak, you smell violets, you smell a little bit of tar, but the toastiness of the oak is very fragrant. You smell black fruits, and it's not hard to smell it. You know how sometimes with young wines, especially from the left bank, you almost smell nothing, or you just smell tannin? That doesn't happen with Margaux wines. And so when we talk about aromatic or fragrant, some people think it must be floral. It doesn't have to be floral. It just has to be, there's some intensity in terms of the aroma. And it's very pleasing, a little bit on the perfume side, but mostly just dark fruit, some chocolate, but really nice. And that's what we talk when we talk fragrant. It's just pleasing. It's very strong in terms of the intensity of the berries. So you've got the dark fruit, black currants, black plums, but then you've got this bite. When I first drank this, it's almost like a bitterness, like a greenness. Now I'm tasting it, it's more like tobacco leaves, and it's like tar. That's kind of very characteristic of Margaux wines. And why I know this is that I have just drank the 2010 Chateau Margaux, which I've also reviewed, also from the Margaux region. And they're very similar in terms of their taste profile and their smell. That has really helped me distinguish the Margaux region. But really fragrant, aromatic, and the softness is really what distinguishes Margaux wines. When you look at Pauillac wines, you look at power. When you look at St. Julien wines, to me, you get a little bit of edginess, a little exotic Asian spice type aromas. Margaux to me is very round. It's very encompassing. So I like that type of feeling. It makes me feel very much at home. This is a wine that, you know, late at night you sip, you're just reading a book. That's the type of feeling you get from this type of wine. Yeah, some people may feel it's like a burnt toast or a bitter taste, but I don't think it's bitterness. It's more like tobacco leaves. When you're chewing tobacco leaves or any type of leaf, there is a bit of residual, not greenness, but a little bit of fibrous nature to it. That's not bitter, but just fibrous. And so that's, to me, fairly distinctive of the Margaux region. I really like this wine. I don't think it technically has hit its peak yet. I think it's still not there. I think 2010 is a very, very strong vintage, and so it might take a little bit more time. I'd give it another 3-4 years before it starts to hit its peak. It's still, I think, on its rise. My score of this wine is 93 points. It might actually get to at its peak to 95 points. It is just needs a little bit more time to balance out. I just feel that it's just hasn't really hit its optimum equilibrium in terms of everything. There is still some edginess that is not quite in balance yet, but it's getting there. And I think it's partly because of the strong vintage. The tannins are quite strong. Really enjoy this wine, and really spectacular tasting from my perspective. Hope you've enjoyed this. Until next time, happy drinking.